All right, good morning, everyone. I think we're just going to wait a couple more minutes to let folks to trickle in, and appreciate you all joining, and a special thanks to Dr. Krutka, Senator Rothfuss, Christine Reed at the university, and we'll go ahead and get going in about 30 to 60 seconds. So appreciate everyone joining. And you will see a little Q&A. I think you can ask questions through there. I can't promise we can get to everything. We had quite a few folks already submit questions. There were some really good themes, so we'll try to cover as much as we can. But apologies in advance. We only have an hour and a half, so we might miss a few things as well. So the order that we'll go in today, we'll introduce folks from the university on the state side, and then we'll go ahead and introduce the folks that are participating from the Bitcoin mining community who've taken the time to join us and share their expertise today. So really appreciate you all joining and hearing from you, and then we'll dig into some larger themes of questions already submitted, and hopefully we'll have a little time for Q&A at the end. And apologies in advance if, again, we don't get to your question, but we'll do our best. So I'll go ahead and get started. I'm Amanda Cavaleri. I live in Wyoming, 5th generation Coloradan, but got there as soon as I could. And we'll go ahead and start with intros from the university and state side. So Dr. Krutka and Senator Rothfuss, would love to hear from each of you.
Thanks, Amanda. So I'll start. So first of all, I just want to, on behalf of the School of Energy Resources here at the University of Wyoming, welcome everyone to this town hall. Really, we're honored to host this panel, although Amanda is the force, and Senator Rothfuss behind making sure it got done, and the initial concept. You've already heard from Amanda, but I'll talk a little bit later about why we're interested in this topic at the School of Energy Resources. So next, I'd like to hand it over to Senator Rothfuss for his welcome as well.
Thank you, Dr. Krutka. I'm Senator Chris Rothfuss. I'm the minority leader in the Wyoming legislature, but I think more importantly for this venue, I chair the Blockchain Select Committee that has been looking at regulatory structure and framework for blockchain and cryptocurrency technologies, as well as other digital innovation technologies over the past few years. This is a topic that's very dear to my heart, looking at cryptocurrency mining in the state of Wyoming, trying to move us forward as a state and trying to understand better stakeholder interests and needs. We've had a couple of select committee meetings so far that have focused on this. We're putting together some legislation in particular to try and address some of the concerns regarding our regulated utility structure that provides challenges for competitive rate bases in Wyoming. And we're hopeful that that legislation will provide more flexibility. But today, I'm really very interested in hearing from stakeholders, trying to understand better the concerns as we look for solutions in Wyoming for our blockchain and cryptocurrency communities. And I see Senator Lummis joining us. So with that opening, I'd like to hand it over and welcome Senator Lummis. Great to see you today, Senator.
It's great to see you as well, Chris. It's always been such a delight to work with you, and a delight to work with you on this issue as well. So Amanda, if you're ready for me, I'll just launch, right? Okay.
We'd love to hear from you, and you've been really interested in your expertise and leadership in DC and also at the state level previously. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on Bitcoin mining and where the state can go with that, especially with the energy abundance in the state.
Well, exactly right. And thank you for giving me the chance to participate today. It's a pleasure to be with you because of the role you're playing in acknowledging the opportunity for Wyoming to be a place where Bitcoin can be mined, with China deciding to remove Bitcoin mining from its shores an opportunity is created for Wyoming and other states to engage businesses that are interested in mining Bitcoin. And Wyoming's an ideal place for it because we are the nation's largest exporting state of energy. There are states that create more energy than we do, but they also consume more energy than we do. So the opportunity to use this energy that we create in Wyoming to mine and create a great store of value. What's digital gold is the opportunity that we're presented with here. And your leadership and involvement in this issue is something that I think we all appreciate. The University of Wyoming's been a great partner for the state's blockchain and digital asset initiatives. You know, we really want to build a climate in Wyoming, as Chris Rothfuss said, for interpreters to bring their hard work, energy, and innovation to our state. And Chris and his colleagues in the Wyoming legislature have established an environment, a statutory environment, as well as a business climate in this state that is second to none for Bitcoin. There's other opportunities that are unique for Wyoming in this area. Of course, harnessing flared natural gas is something that Wyoming is somewhat uniquely able to do. Natural gas that would otherwise be released into the atmosphere is being repurposed to power Bitcoin mining rigs, and often it's at a fraction of the cost of other energy sources. Now, Chris, you did something that I didn't know about that you might want to talk a little more about. Wyoming created a special blockchain interruptible service tariff with the approval of the Public Service Commission. And that allows electricity companies to create unique agreements with Bitcoin miners for power. That's new to me. So Wyoming continues to innovate in this space and create opportunities for Bitcoin mining. Everything that occurs in this space, I think, makes the blockchain more versatile, and the opportunities are just endless. So thank you for letting me join you from Washington today. We're anxious to pop in and out of your work here today so we can listen in. And with tremendous thanks to my alma mater, the University of Wyoming, for embracing this technology. Senator Chris Rothfuss, thanks for your leadership in this area. And this is an exciting endeavor for all of us.
Thank you, Senator Lummis. It's an honor to have you here, and thank you for all of your work in DC on our behalf.
Well, it is a challenge here. You know, this morning I was in an off-the-record conversation with Steve Mnuchin, and we've got a lot of work to do with him. He is someone who is not convinced that this is a worthwhile endeavor. And so when you have people like that, thought leaders that are still embracing what I think are 10-year-old views about financial innovation, it just shows we've got a lot of work to do. There's a lot of headwinds still, but I'm proud of our state for really embracing in a thoughtful manner the opportunities here. And we're going to keep swinging here in Washington and supporting your efforts in Wyoming. So thanks again.
And thank you, Senator. And I think one thing that is important is this is bipartisan work in the state of Wyoming. And I know that it's bipartisan, that you've formed an incredible group there and reached across the aisle to work on our behalf in this space. And so we appreciate your efforts there, and we'll do anything we can to help those out.
Thank you very much. That's the fun thing about, you know, as acrimonious as this year started, to have something like this topic that is very bipartisan is yet another indication of the strength with which it goes forward.
Thank you. And feel free to hop in and out as your time allows. Really, I know you're very busy right now, especially before the holidays. So it's really up to you, and you're welcome to hop in anytime. And we'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Krutka and then Professor Lupien, and then we'll go ahead and get to know our panelists as well before diving in.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Thanks, Senator Lummis. So I think Senator Lummis actually touched on a lot of things I was going to say, so that'll make this quick. But you know, why is the School of Energy Resources so interested in hosting a Bitcoin webinar? You've just heard several of the reasons. We were founded in 2006 by the Wyoming legislature, and we focus on energy-driven economic development for Wyoming. And we meet that mission through applied research programs and supporting cutting-edge research here across UW. Obviously, you've already heard there is a tie between Bitcoin mining and energy sector in Wyoming, and we're really interested in supporting and building up that tie. You already heard about using flared gas and potentially other waste energy sources to support Bitcoin mining and energy uses, and we think that's a great use. In general, the School of Energy Resources supports the state of Wyoming and its energy sector. And so our interest here is increasing energy demand in Wyoming. And we see Bitcoin mining as being an important component of that and a great opportunity for the future. We want to do our part to make Wyoming an ideal place to do this mining. And so for that, we're already working here at the School of Energy Resources on technologies and policies that will make Wyoming energy a low carbon, reliable energy mix. If you don't know, the Wyoming Energy Authority has set a state energy strategy to be net zero by 2050, and Governor Gordon has challenged the state to go even further to be net negative. And so we're working on the technologies that we think can make that happen at the lowest cost here in Wyoming. There's so much to be excited about in the energy sector here. A big focus for us is carbon capture, use, and storage, and we're working on commercial scale CO2 storage options here at the School of Energy Resources in our Wyoming Carbon Safe project, and that is happening in Campbell County. We've also looked at the Rock Springs uplift for CO2 storage in Sweetwater County, so we're really looking for opportunities across the state. I'm sure you've heard about the advanced nuclear project happening that's been announced by TerraPower and Rocky Mountain Power, so really exciting opportunity there. Big wind projects being built. I mean, there's so much going on. I can't touch on all of it, but I do want you to know that the energy sector here is ramping up and is ready. And as Senator Lummis said, we produce a lot more energy than we consume. So we will have excess for the foreseeable future. So the School of Energy Resources is not alone at UW in seeing the importance of blockchain technology and Bitcoin. SCR is one of 4 schools and colleges supporting the Center of Blockchain and Digital Innovation. The others that you probably saw on the screen at the beginning of this town hall are the College of Business, the College of Agricultural and Natural Resources, the College of Engineering and Applied Science. And Professor Stephen Lupien is the director of that center. And I believe right after me, he's just going to spend a couple minutes discussing the activities there. So thank you all so much. And Steve?
Well, hello, everybody, and pleased to have this opportunity to speak. As Dr. Krutka mentioned, the University of Wyoming is very much committed to exploring how this asset class can impact the state of Wyoming, and one of the challenges that that we've seen from a Bitcoin mining standpoint is actually having a trained workforce that is capable of working within this space. Bitcoin mining is a unique profession, different from just a data center, and there are unique skills that you need to learn. And to really to be effective and be attractive to the mining companies that we're trying to bring here to Wyoming. So in cooperation with a large mining operation and a not-for-profit called BTC Impact, University of Wyoming has actually set up a small Bitcoin and Litecoin mining operation on campus and are developing an educational and experiential program around what are the skills that are needed for Bitcoin mining. Again, we're not looking to be a competitive Bitcoin miner. We're talking, a few dozen rigs, not the huge number that you need to really be, a profitable Bitcoin miner. But what we want students to experience is what are the challenges that an employee faces in Bitcoin mining. How do you deal with the power balancing? How do you deal with the heat mitigation? How do you deal with the setup and maintenance of these unique pieces of equipment? So the way the University of Wyoming is doing it is actually through a mining club. We've formed an official ASUW club at the university, which is run by students along with faculty advisors. And that club is managing our current Bitcoin mining operation, which is set up in one of our educational labs. Over the course of the next couple of months, we're working with another donor to actually build out a dedicated Bitcoin mining space. And that's going to be interesting for students as well, too, because they're going to have experience not only with running Bitcoin mining equipment, but how do you set up a Bitcoin mining operation, albeit on a very small scale. So I think it's pretty exciting to see students actually rolling up their sleeves, taking equipment apart, dealing with the power challenges, dealing with the things that people don't think about in Bitcoin mining. Are there times when you want to up your hash power? Are there times you want to decrease your hash power? And all those things that it's one thing to handle them in a classroom environment, but it's an entirely different things when students actually roll up their sleeves and take out screwdrivers and actually work on these very real problems. So I'm very proud that the University of Wyoming, to the best of my knowledge, is the first Division I school to actually mine Bitcoin on campus. In addition, we also have, a little tangentially, we're also doing staking pools as well too, because I want students to experience the full gamut of what's involved in the consensus mechanisms of these new asset classes. So over the coming months, I think you'll be hearing more out of the University of Wyoming on our Bitcoin mining operation. You'll be hearing more about a wonderful organization called BTC Impact, which is set up specifically to teach mining operations, not only through universities like the University of Wyoming, but they also see Bitcoin mining as an escape for many in inner city as well too. So I'm very, very proud to partner with that organization as well too. And our students are excited about this. We're just getting up and running. Our machines have been running for approximately a month now. They've gotten their first couple of distributions from the mining pool that we participate in. So they're excited to actually see it all happening. And obviously our goal is to create the workforce necessary for the attraction of the Bitcoin mining operations that we're hoping to bring to Wyoming.
Thank you, Professor Lupien. And I just want to add a little anecdote. Got to work with you and Senator Rothfuss on cleaning up some of those miners with students and getting them plugged in. So that's a rare occasion to have.
No, it was
senators
fun.
And students come together. Yeah,
it was fun. Yeah, I'm glad you were there and to be able to see it as well too. Our goal, as the students are building up resources, they're already starting to think about, well, what do we do with these resources? Do we buy more mining equipment? How do we invest the funds? And I think it's great to see them dealing with the very real world challenges that mining operations face every day. So again, there's a lot of things you can teach in classrooms. Sometimes you just need to get dirty. So thank you so
exactly.
much.
Appreciate it. And it was really, I loved some of the business students were the ones pulling out, the boards and really getting to work on getting things plugged in. So it was exciting to see the multidisciplinary aspect of that. And so with these intros, we'll go ahead and guests, if you don't mind, pulling up your live faces versus pictures. Love to hear from each of you, and we'll just go ahead and go in alphabetical order of first name. So that leaves Alex as first, if you don't mind telling us a bit about yourself and what you're working on and your interest in Wyoming.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Amanda. Thanks, Senator Rothfuss and Lummis, for all that you guys are doing. Senator Rothfuss, what you're doing in the state, and then Senator Lummis, what you guys are doing on the Hill and nationally, is just really, really important, really exciting. Thank you to the School of Energy Resources as well for putting this on. These types of forums for kind of the sharing of ideas and information are extremely important. And I think the education component, Professor Lupien, I had no idea what you're doing that with your students at I think it's like an electrical shop for Bitcoin mining. Such an amazing idea. So yeah, my name is Alex Brammer. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for Luxor Technology Corporation. We're a mining services company. We provide pool services, mining advisory services, equipment procurement services. I came to Bitcoin from a military background. So I just finished up a 15-year career in the military, and then a political science background. In the midpoint of my career, was able to do a master's and a doctorate in the UK on a Marshall Scholarship, where I focused very heavily on civil conflict and kind of institutional stability, concepts of legitimacy. And that's how I came to Bitcoin as well. Kind of first time I discovered it was on my way back from my 4th trip to Iraq. And I was literally on the way back from an Uber or from the airport in an Uber, and he was kind of messing around on his phone. And, I asked him what it was, and he said, Bitcoin. Started diving down the rabbit hole, kind of speculatively investing during that bull market. But then a number of events kind of coalesced in the subsequent years, started coming towards the end of my military career and, looking for what was going to be next. This was kind of around the time, this was around the time of the initial COVID lockdowns, the macro environment changing so drastically. We had the February freeze, February 2020 deep freeze, really that was deeply affected Texas, but it affected the whole country and kind of revealed some grid instability issues, grid resilience issues. The GameStop incident, surprisingly, was also something. So it's all of these different kind of these different exogenous shocks that kind of coalesce to make me realize, like, wow, there's something a lot deeper here. And so I started diving down that rabbit hole and coming to it from a political science perspective and from a conflict perspective. It really highlighted what Bitcoin is doing for the provision of essential services. Like when if you study civil conflict insurgencies, when essential services break down, you start to have, the social and political order also will break down. That's, I lived that in Iraq over and over again, and seeing that really kind of drives my interest in Bitcoin and mining specifically. I view mining as kind of the security forces of the next of the new paradigm that is emerging, that is going to, I think, replace the current geopolitical order. And that's why I'm so interested in Wyoming. I think what you guys are doing in Wyoming, the kind of forward-looking legislative and regulatory framework that you are developing, is one of the most important things going on right now in Bitcoin. And if there's any way that I can help or be a part of that, I'm very excited for that. So I want to thank everyone on this call that's organizing this and participating, and excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Really appreciate you being here, and good to see you. Some of us were in Dubai the other week, so it was nice to see some faces in person around the Bitcoin mining conference. Griffin, good to see you. Love the hat.
Howdy.
Thanks for joining.
Howdy. Yeah, I also want to thank y'all too. I'm Texan oil field, and what I've really seen is we basically have way too many voices down here on our political and legislative side to really get anything done. And so we leave it up to the smart people in Wyoming to give us the framework that we can piggyback off of and just add some more justification to the space, I believe. So yes, all you senators, we really do appreciate you, and I see a great relationship, really symbiotic with the two states. My background is oil and gas through and through. I was having a couple margaritas with a guy that told me he had some stranded gas, and there's no way he could ever get it to the market because too far from a pipeline, wasn't enough gas, and then it was too high content of nitrogen. So he's going to get diffed out at the pipe anyway. And once he told me how much he was making an MCF, I could not unsee that. So started doing some research. I viewed it as like a third commodity, oil, gas, Bitcoin, whatever this is. It sounds great. And then went to Austin, met a man named Will Cole, who Senator Lummis knows pretty well. And they orange pilled me to the point where I can't think about anything but Bitcoin. And we started transferring from like S9s to this current mine, raised some money and put some What's miners in there, some Cadillacs, if you will, and started ramping up our hash rate there. Next thing you know, the gas and the flare, and then the opportunity of the Chexit is what we're calling it, of the Chinese exodus and all of their mining hash rate, having to leave the country, and they're scouring the planet for where's the cheapest energy in the world. That's reliable year round. It's very, very hard to beat Texas electricity prices. So then we pivoted to the grid just for sheer demand, and got a site out in West Texas, and now we're standing up like 300 megawatts and really taking advantage of the stranded energy, whether it's hydrocarbons, wind, solar. We don't really care where it comes from. Just give it to me for cheap, and help kind of balance the grid at the same time. And when you're mining in the field, in the gas field, when your generators go down, you're panicking. But on the grid side, where you're happy to unplug because they actually pay you to do it. And thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for the context as well, Griffin. Appreciate it. Jay, if you're up for it, would love to hear from you. And thank you for joining.
Good thing. Thanks for having me, and thank you, Amanda, for coordinating, and the university for hosting. And again, obviously, thank you, Senator Rothfuss and Lummis for the work that you guys are doing. It's always nice to have allies and advocates. I'm Jay Beddict. I'm the director of research at Foundry. I'm also the product manager for Foundry USA pool, which is the largest North American pool. Really, again, excited to be here, share some of the knowledge and insights. I think Wyoming is doing great work on on its approach to Bitcoin and other digital assets. At Foundry, we do a lot of different stuff, but my experience is primarily more on the technical side. So happy to deep dive into protocol issues and stuff like that. Been mining since 2014, and prior to Foundry, I was the lead technical resource at a very large consulting firm to help them develop technology to audit and advise around digital assets. So happy to be here, happy to share.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. And next, we'll go ahead with Mag. Congratulations on the new role as well.
Hey, everyone. So I've been in the mining space for over the last year, specifically helping connect miners from China with renewable operations in the US. I'm currently VP Business Development at Coinkite, where we look at Bitcoin security and makes security hardware devices, and also collaborating with miners because you got to protect that Bitcoin that you mine. But I actually came from a decade in clean tech and low carbon tech and helping companies stay competitive in Canada. So it's both kind of a economic development lens on how do we retain businesses, heavy industry, energy intense, trade exposed companies in a world where we're transitioning to a low carbon economy. And what's fascinating is that mining is actually probably one of the most energy intense trade exposed industries, because as we all know, miners can pick up and go if the economic conditions aren't great, whether that's something like carbon pricing coming in and you were coal heavy, or just energy prices increasing. It's one of the reasons many companies have left Ontario. So working in government, I know firsthand how important it is to see government political staff get involved and try to understand new industries, especially one that's growing so fast. And it's actually really amazing to see both from the educational component, because you need skilled workers to come in. But it's a whole educational campaign that takes a while for people to recognize that opportunity. And it's amazing because I haven't really seen this happen in Canada, because I'm in Canada, in terms of the support from the political level and institutions, academic institutions, to try to support this new industry that hasn't been around for very long. It's not like traditional steel that's been around forever. So kudos to everyone working on that.
Thanks, Mags, and appreciate your economic development background as well during this discussion. So now we'll go ahead and hear from Matt.
Hey everybody, nice to be here virtually in Wyoming. So I'm Matt Prusak. I'm the Chief Business Development Officer of the U.S. Bitcoin Corporation. We're a large-scale mine, predominantly operating now on the East Coast near Niagara Falls, though we are rolling out our sites nationally as we speak. I remember I was in Wyoming, was it maybe 8 weeks ago to testify. I really enjoyed that experience. So thank you for putting this event on. I want to keep pushing the ball forward as much as I can in support of your efforts. I love Wyoming. I split time between there and Austin, Texas, where I'm kind of based for now. My sister was at the University of Wyoming, so it's great to hear about the lab that you're setting up. That's really something special. I mean, all I want to say is that I'm excited to support the state and these initiatives regarding mining, providing whatever data you need to kind of get all the ducks in a row, and looking forward to getting a site set up ASAP. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, appreciate it. And thanks for joining. I was good to see you about 8 weeks ago. It's nice to have other miners who have an affiliation with the state at these things. And good to hear from you. And next, we'll go ahead and hear from Ryan. Thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me, Amanda. My name is Ryan Randall, born and raised in North Dakota. Worked basically my whole life in oil and gas. So worked as a landman for EOG Resources, primarily focused in North Dakota, but also kind of like the last 5 years was in the Powder River Basin. And so, handled a lot of deal flow, kind of kept in front of the rig. And then in 2017, left there. Been in Bitcoin, I guess, since 2013, but recently was working on a friend of mine who's an engineer, and been trying to convince him to mine Bitcoin with me. And we finally found our opportunity when the Chexit now is what we're calling it, when that provided that opportunity, and really was kind of inspired as well from Amanda putting this kind of panel together over the summer. And so we started a company called Digital Reserve Energy, basically focusing on our own mining, but also helping large players come into Wyoming and find site selection for them. So we're focused on oil and gas as energy sources, but also on grid. And so I guess, I was kind of inspired by the quote. I think it was Naval Ravikant. He said, money is a man-made construct used to trade energy. And I really kind of love that. And energy is the security. Energy security is the basis for national security. And I kind of think of Bitcoin as that, as like our own self-sovereign security. And I think that that's the way that Wyoming should kind of look at it too. And I'm just really happy to be here, and look forward to contributing to the panel.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. And now we'll go ahead and hear from Shaun. Thanks for joining, Shaun.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. And thank you for inviting me to this town hall. I'm honored to be invited. And so, thank you for having me as one of the panelists here. Just a bit about myself so my name is Shaun Connell, and I'm the EVP of Power with Lancium. I think I'm one of the few people that is in the Bitcoin community that actually started in Power first and kind of found Bitcoin mining, where I've kind of heard a theme of a lot of people find Bitcoin and then kind of have to learn Power. So I'm fortunate to kind of have an experience where I spent a large time block, about 15 years of my initial first career working for a large publicly traded power generation company. And so my responsibility, this was at the start of 2002, it was the dawn of deregulation. And it kind of felt like the wild, wild west for power markets, right? And it's kind of eerie how similar it feels for kind of like the Bitcoin mining space, because these markets are starting to kind of develop and evolve, and these things are starting to rhyme with kind of what happened with deregulation in 2002. So my responsibility with the power company was to build and lead a trade desk that was responsible for optimizing a fleet of generation assets that were located in the Northeast US wholesale power markets, as well as Canada. And my job with Lancium now is to do what I did for power generators, but with application to Bitcoin mining, because really a power generation has commodity inputs and outputs, right? So natural gas in, power out, where a Bitcoin mine is the same thing. It's energy in, hashing out, and as well can produce ancillaries, so some value, additional revenue streams from mining. So a little bit about Lancium. Lancium is a technology company that creates software, technical solutions, and energy infrastructure with a goal of decarbonizing the grid. We recently announced a $150 million equity raise last week that we're going to be using towards our 2 gigawatt plus development pipeline of several West Texas clean campuses. These campuses are going to be hosting Bitcoin miners, and they're going to be operated as controllable load resources. So what is a controllable load resource? Well, a controllable load resource is like being a power generator, but in reverse, right? So the same way like a coal plant or natural gas plant can participate in kind of energy bidding and also provide valuable ancillaries like backup power, primary frequency, a controllable load resource can actually provide all the same services, which really works out for grids in transition as you're replacing dispatchable natural gas and coal plants with intermittent wind, which isn't really kind of a fair trade on its own, but you start to add on these other technologies of batteries and now this new invention of a controllable load that says when energy is cheap and abundant, 100% uptime. When energy is expensive and scarce, 0% uptime, or providing ancillary services at a cost lower than other generation can. So with Wyoming being rich with wind, similar to Texas, and having actually some better wind than Texas, there's several large, 200 to 700 megawatt type sites down in Texas. We look forward to kind of working with Wyoming to build out some of these clean campus types facilities in Wyoming, given the resources that are located in Wyoming. So thanks for having me on the panel and look forward to this discussion.
All right, thank you, Shaun. And then last, but certainly not least, we've got Whit from Compass. So appreciate you helping all the plebs become miners.
Thanks for putting this all together, Amanda and Senator Rothfuss. It's great to be able to share the panel here with you as well. And thanks to the University of Wyoming. I think this is it's a very important topic that more universities should be focused on, whether it's Bitcoin or Bitcoin mining specifically. This is the wave of the future, and it is critical for institutions to teach this, to talk about this more openly, to do like University of Wyoming is doing, and helping people get access and put hands on these ASICs and learn how to plug them in and how to manage them, because it's very critical that everyone have at least one ASIC running on the Bitcoin network to help secure this new and exciting asset class that's going to power the future of finance. So, I'm Whit Gibbs, co-founder and CEO of Compass Mining. Compass, effectively, the easiest way to think of us is like the Airbnb for Bitcoin miners. Anyone who wants to source a machine, get it hosted at a good facility anywhere around the world, you come to Compass and we can get that set up for you. We're currently working with 22 facilities in 5 countries. And, over the course of this year, we've helped a little over 6,500 plebs that are new market entrants into Bitcoin mining, if you will, get an ASIC plugged in and mine some Bitcoin. And as of next year, we already have 280 megawatts contracted that will be reserved specifically for what we call the retail mining crowd, the people who are looking to get 1 to 5 miners and plug those in and have them hosted as a managed service. So that's really what Compass does. I'm excited to get to, nerd out and chat with the panelists here today. I know we've got some good questions, so I don't want to take up any more time here, Amanda. I'll pass it back over to you so we can get some of these questions answered.
Perfect. So let's dig in a little bit. I think one of the questions that I hear, from the Czechs is what happened in China. So we've heard China say that, they banned Bitcoin mining because of the energy usage, but as they move forward with their digital currency, it seems that might not actually be the case, or the whole story or half of the story. So would love to hear kind of more of the geopolitical landscape, and then dig into what's going on in the US and how Wyoming can become more competitive after that, and what it would take to get y'all to Wyoming. Would love to have you there. So on the geopolitical side, Mags, it'd be great to hear from you.
Yeah, so the exodus in China was, as some people, are thinking, China's trying to shift towards low carbon economy, but that's not what happened there. It had to do with capital controls. So China had put in some capital control, like varying type of capital controls over the years to make sure that money stays in China. But and they banned over time Bitcoin multiple times, including trading. But what happened was there was a loophole where investors could invest in mining and earn Bitcoin, and then that Bitcoin was being sent overseas. And that's not something that they could control. And so this was kind of a closing of the loophole. I heard from contacts that have close ties to government in China that there were billions of dollars leaving in the weeks before the mining ban. So my understanding is it was strictly around that.
Thanks, Mag, for that context. And then, you know, a few of us, I think especially Whit has a really good perspective on Eastern Europe and some of the things going on over there. If you don't mind chiming in about some of the global landscape, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I mean, we're seeing now more than ever just really an open arms approach to mining in most places outside of China. So Russia has taken a very proactive stance when it comes to welcoming in Bitcoin miners. Kazakhstan had, although that, you know, now they're the energy constraints from Russia, the same that is being faced in regions like Abkhazia. So you've got Russia leading this charge when it comes to the CIS region, and in parts of Europe, whether it's Georgia or Ukraine or Belarus or Italy or Germany, there is now mining in many countries on a smaller scale. And then when you get up to Scandinavia, there are large mining operations in Norway and in Sweden and in, of course, Iceland, which, you know, most people would consider to be like the granddaddy of all of the big mining sites. That's, you know, I think my first exposure to mining was watching a CNBC walkthrough of the Genesis mining farm in Iceland. But you know, the cool thing here is that now we're seeing such a movement within the United States for mining, whether it's Texas or it's Wyoming or it's New York or it's Kentucky, or, you know, there's so many states now that are getting on this bandwagon and rallying behind this, you know, security layer for Bitcoin. It's awesome to see. So, you know, I think when it comes to Wyoming, there is a massive opportunity because, let's face it, the climate's great. Obviously, the regulatory landscape is great. You guys have led the charge in all things Bitcoin when it comes to the United States. And you guys have access and oversupply of power, which, you know, ultimately is what miners need to thrive. So presents a really good opportunity. And I think that in the next couple of years, we're going to see more and more facilities get built out in Wyoming that are going to support, you know, hundreds of megawatts of hash rate there, or of capacity there for Bitcoin miners.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, sorry, Mag, it goes back to a little bit. I think one of the things that I failed to mention at the beginning of this is one of the goals for the state of Wyoming has now become how do, you know, surrounding this thesis, how can Wyoming become 5% of the Bitcoin mining power in the US by the next halvening, which is May 2024. So with that, I know that's, you know, quite a large number, but I think it's really in line with what you're saying, and it would mean we need to bump up mining by about 10x of where it is now, assuming that there's no additional competition there. So I know, Alex, you have some thoughts on that in a sec, but Mags and Griffin saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to really highlight that I think most people don't recognize the scale of the opportunity. Half of the whole Bitcoin mining network was taken offline, half of it, 2 million machines. And there's no other industry that has been disrupted to this scale. Like, imagine if half the steel industry just shut down. And so what that means is that it's a huge disruption, but it's a big opportunity for those states and places that want to take it. And it's all across all parts of the economy. Like, we're seeing integration with the energy sector. We need skilled workers and I think we'll get into that, like a variety of skilled workers, because we're staffing up. Those miners that got taken offline, they're coming online here. And so it needs that huge supportive infrastructure, whether that's from the educational sector, whether that's support from government, or just the private sector stepping up.
And yeah, if I could piggyback on that, I would just say the two things that miners love is cheap energy and freedom, and you have to have the right government regime in there. And Wyoming's nailed both of those. And as you were saying, I've got guys that have ASICs looking for gas. I've got grid guys that have capital. And the one thing everybody's missing is an experienced miner. So if you're any students out there, I'm very jealous of you. I didn't have this opportunity. Do your homework and study as much as you can, because the opportunities are, like she said, massive.
Yeah, I think, I mean, cheap power and freedom, can't put it any better than that. I think as miners, we think about mitigating risk vectors, right? And so where Wyoming comes into this and is already leading the charge on this, like it's hard to overstate the dislocation that the Chinese miners faced. And these are miners that have spent, the past 10 years securing the Bitcoin network. And this was a significant emotional event for them. And they are all optimizing for jurisdictional diversification to hedge risk. Like, we think about it in terms of power, and we think about it in terms of regulatory risk. And that was something that, regulatory risk was ultimately the tail risk that created the black swan in China. And so really, you guys are already on a path in Wyoming to making yourselves very, very attractive, because my assumption is, if I come and set up a facility in Wyoming, I'm going to have the support of the local community, of the state legislature, and the regulatory framework. And now really you just add that on. So that's Griffin's freedom. And now you add on to that extremely low power costs, utilizing your incredible wind resources, creating, tax incentives for that, creating tax incentives for the development of those wind resources. And you've really created a perfect storm to reach that 10x goal, Amanda, that you're talking about. And I think again, going back to what Griffin mentioned, though, it really is, it's the power cost, and it's the regulatory stability, and put other ways, freedom.
Yeah, and just to drive that point home, I mean, we operate in several U.S. states, and it's a huge drain on bandwidth when we have regulatory uncertainty, with specific states actually going so far as to, ban and target specific businesses operating, in the Bitcoin space. And I do think Wyoming, to Alex's point, is leading that well.
Appreciate this. I think it's really good to have that context of, this is this is one of the most distributed networks that's ever existed in, the history of mankind, and maybe, this century ever will be. So having that global perspective is really important, especially as miners. We saw how resilient they are, that almost 50% of the hash power just went offline in China, and now the US accounts for 35% at least of the hash power, and that's going to continue to grow, because we do at this time, especially in certain states, have very clear, regulations and a lot of certainty, and the legal framework that protects entrepreneurs as well. Senator Rothfuss, is there anything that you would love to hear from the miners? I don't think we've really covered much about, and I'm not sure how much we'd like to, but it'd be nice to hear a little bit about how really the grid works high level and balancing loads. I know, Shaun, you have some thoughts on that. Matt, you all have found some hydropower and are probably looking for creative avenues. So as folks look at places like Wyoming, where there's an abundance of wind, sun, maybe even geothermal, and a lot of stranded gas, these are some things to consider as well.
Amanda, very briefly, I'll just chime in, and a lot of what I'm hearing, I appreciate. If I get nothing else out of this, checks it is now in my vocabulary, so thank you for that. But one of the key concepts here really comes down to the regulatory structure. And one of the philosophies, probably the key philosophy of our select committee work over the past 5 years, has been trying to regulate to enable instead of regulate to restrict, which is a very different philosophy, I think, than what we traditionally see. And it's the idea that we want to be able to facilitate advanced and emerging technologies in Wyoming. We want to be able to evolve a market from the current carbon dependence that we have to a more diversified and rigorous power future. We know that Wyoming is good at power. We know that we're good at energy. We'd like to be a key player, obviously, in the future of that space, not just the past of that space. And this is an opportunity for us to really team, I think, with an incredible emerging technology that resonates well with a lot of Wyoming values, and move and transition forward together as we make that move forward. So what I need to understand better, and what we on the select committee need to understand better, is where we can be supportive, where we can provide regulatory certainty. We understand power cost. Obviously, we've heard that a lot, and we get that as a priority. So we're working on that, obviously, trying to find ways, as I mentioned earlier, to create some deregulation within our regulated power structure by having some deregulated zones. So this is something I'm interested in talking to a few of you about that clearly have experience in this space. So that'll be a follow-up conversation that I'll look forward to, but we can talk about that here as well. But the other questions are, what are we seeing in other states and other jurisdictions that might be unique to cryptocurrency mining that would be beneficial for us to be proactive in addressing? Power cost is number one. What would 2 through 5 be as we sort of start getting local? And Amanda, that I think is a little bit further down the agenda, but I just wanted to make sure that we end up having an opportunity to talk about that. But I do think that I'll stop there and allow you to take it back on track to the the grid discussion.
No,
Thank you.
I think that's fine too. I know Shaun already did like a little bit of a high level concept, but you know, Shaun, Matt, Griffin, Ryan, would be great to hear from, and Whit, great to hear from you about what would bring, you know, what are those 2 through 5, right?
Right. You know, I think just to echo or to reinforce some of the points both you and the senator made, you know, we're energy omnivores at the end of the day. Some of us prefer flare gas, or some of us are using wind, solar, natural gas, coal, nuclear. We're flexible, right, on power. And so I think when we talk about energy costs, it could be helpful either in this or future conversations to break down where the levers are, because there are many, you know, ways to get that amount of energy. In some, you may have more leeway in terms of your ability to enable than others. Frankly, I know that the flare gas community, as an example, has had some market success. And so I think we're very keen to engage on this market enablement. And if we bifurcate energy into the full pie as to what you mean by that, I mean, geothermal was alluded to, that has vast appeal. It's also for now vastly expensive. So again, there are things you can move towards long run as an enabler. And then there may be some short-term stuff. I mean, you can't really do hydro unless you've got the river, but there are other forms of energy where you might find power producers to be more receptive, and we'd be happy to work hand in hand with them, either in a special economic sense or on grid, whatever's appropriate.
Appreciate that. And Senator Rothfuss, feel free to chime in for more clarification too.
So maybe I'll try and kind of build out the list that you're kind of mentioning, and you know, kind of maybe it's kind of a good way to look at it is just like framing about kind of what makes Texas a really special place that is attracting all these Bitcoin miners to go there, because it kind of touches on a bunch of different areas. So one, which is like it's a resource rich area that if you kind of look at kind of an overlap of the US wind tunnel that goes straight down the US and this kind of sun belt perfectly overlaps, you got this amazing resources. So Wyoming has the same for wind, probably a little bit better wind, but a little bit less in the solar. You know, for mining, is what we're really looking at is like the all-in delivered cost to our energy bill. And there's really kind of 3 categories for those buckets. The first is like energy. The second is the delivery of the energy. And then third is government policy. So Texas is special because since they're so rich in resources, they don't need to kind of have a lot of government policy around having renewable energy credits. In New York, they have 0 emission credits. So like there's not an added cost onto load for having to kind of procure renewables that they're just so flush and abundant. So not having kind of that charge on a bill is advantageous. On the delivery of energy, Texas breaks out the transmission and the distribution costs, so that if you are distribution connected, you're going to pay distribution and transmission. But if you're only transmission voltage connected, you just pay transmission. So segregation of those charges is important for being able to optimize to say, we're not part of the network, we're on the transmission voltage. Adding to the transmission side is in Texas, their cost allocation methodology is called a 4 coincident peaks. And so their summer peaking system, so between the months of June through September, the 15-minute interval during the month for what your peak consumption is during that interval is your transmission tag for the next year. Bitcoin mining loads are extremely flexible, so they're able to actually bring their loads offline during these times to not impact the system, so that you're not having to do further build out the transmission to service that load. So having the cost methodology for how you're applying that transmission, 4CP is great in ERCOT, and some other systems have different ways. So it's just a favorable one that allows Bitcoin miners to change their behaviors. On the energy side, is obviously you mentioned about having some type of deregulation in some areas that allows you to buy a kind of a transparent rate that's not just kind of like a negotiated rate. ERCOT is also special in that you won't be able to replicate this, which is it's an electrical island, right? And so it's its own system, and so they have higher cost ancillaries, and that works out to Bitcoin miners because you can consume energy and simultaneously sell the ancillary to provide a service that previously a generator could. And the cost for these ancillaries is much higher in Texas because they have to procure all of their backup services on their own. So those are kind of some of the parts on the actual energy build component. And at the start of the line, I would say that for the development and construction of these large data centers is that Texas has a path that's for tax abatements for these large data centers that allows you to have it's a tax relief from the development construction, plus also energy costs. And depending on the size of the data center, impacts the tenure of, is it a 10-year or is it a 20-year, et cetera. So it's very favorable from just kind of this tax abatement structure and just the retail billing and overall market design plus resources is kind of my list down.
That's great. I think someone else, wrote an interesting in the Q&A. Wyoming, because it is so capital intensive, right? Miners, ASIC miners, S19s are about 10,000 each right now, and the cost of energy, per month is quite high. So very capital intensive to do this at scale. We have a lot of home miners, and this is why a company like Compass exists. What are some things that Wyoming can do to incentivize investors to come into the state and help with some of these capital costs? I think that's a great one to consider as well, Senator Rothfuss. And we'll keep moving ahead and just look at a little bit of the landscape of Wyoming. So, the state's a square. You've got two large oil reserves. You've got Powder River Basin. I might let actually Ryan Randall, you're the expert on this. So if you don't mind just kind of giving a lay of the land of like the geography and what's going on in Wyoming. Obviously Yellowstone's off limits, and there's some on-grid companies as well that are probably worth mentioning. Yeah,
so I guess over in Wyoming, the Powder River Basin has kind of been producing oil and gas for over 100 years. I believe it was like 1912 or something like that with the whole Teapot Dome. If you look, there's, I think, 8 or 10 different producing formations. Some of them are more gaseous than others in the Powder River Basin. Powder River Basin is kind of in between Gillette and Cheyenne. If you go to the western side of the state, that's more dry gas, which would, I guess, be more conducive for what you would hook turbines up to if you were to try to mine off the produced natural gas. With that, a lot of the natural gas gets, like they had said, it gets exported out of the state. And with that, just like you have transmission costs, so you're looking for the volume that's to send it over to Chicago, for instance, you're paying, that transportation cost. So if it stays inside the state, you're going to get a better price on that for the producer or for the midstream company. And so, kind of the interesting thing is, when we were first working on this last year, I think if you look back, September 2020, natural gas per MCF was trading at like $1.60, something like that. And just last month, I think we hit over $6. So it went up 300% in just the last year alone. And now it's like 30% off the highs. So now it's below $5. It's at like $4.60. So kind of back of the napkin kind of calculations, I think, on a per kilowatt hour, you can kind of calculate it as like a 1.1 multiplier. So with natural gas at $4.6 per MCF or per MMBTU, you're looking at kind of like energy cost of, between 4.5 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. And so if natural gas kind of goes back to the mean reversion, which we kind of expect it to do, especially after this kind of the winter pricing, usually it's higher, just kind of seasonally, because that's when everybody's using the most natural gas. So come April, I guess we could be looking at, sub $4 gas. And I guess it would be much more economic for larger players to enter in the space, with kind of more competitive pricing in that sense. Did that answer your question up, or are you looking for more color somewhere else?
Yeah, I think so. And then, as far as looking for sites on grid, I didn't really start digging into sites until this summer with the Czechsit. So it would be good to hear some color on the on-grid as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so on-grid has been, I guess, a little bit harder than first anticipated, just in the sense that you're competing on price, right? So no one really wants to come in unless you're competitive nationally, right? So that means at least, less than 5 cents per megawatt or 5 cents per kilowatt. And so I think we have a couple locations now that we're in negotiations with that will be able to offer between 10 and 30 megawatts below that 5 cents. I definitely still in negotiation stages, but for future sites, I guess kind of the big holdup is just there isn't enough capacity for these large players to enter, right? So no one wants to kind of come in and build out the infrastructure, what it's going to take, unless it's going to be a minimum of 50 megawatts, right? And then if you look at 50 megawatts, it's not that much more expensive to go to 300 megawatts. And so to meet that kind of demand, more infrastructure needs to be built out. And with that, the energy providers, they don't want to take on all that risk as well. And so they'd be looking for, the miners themselves to help partake in initial conversations. It looks like they're willing to help share in those costs. So I think that's hopeful, kind of for the future. So the location of the sites, are, I guess, somewhat ideal in the sense that they're accessible, but also, potentially has a mix of energy as well. If we could get natural gas with turbines as well as on grid, and then potentially some solar or wind that goes with it. And I think that blended kind of energy mix is really ideal for, I guess, the energy environment that Wyoming has.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ryan. And then
if I could jump in on the how do you incentivize it in the state of Wyoming? Here, in Texas, we got a bunch of private land, but Wyoming having, fed land and state land. What if you gave the operator a discount on the royalties paid to the state if they paid in Bitcoin, right? Say it's a 12.5%, say 16, but you bumped it down if they mine Bitcoin. Bitcoin goes into the state coffers, and then, you can even have a little startup fund for incentivizing other operators to get in there through that way. Spitballing.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. And there's about 24 billion in the state endowment. Senator Rothfuss, I think somewhere around that number. So
yeah,
do you think
in all
that the
savings
state
accounts right around there.
Yeah, do you think that's something that's worth discussing or bringing up? What Wyoming actually becoming involved in mining, or even just what Griffin mentioned as a form of payment?
The most similar thing that we've been working on, Griffin, is trying to accept sales tax as cryptocurrency and allow entities to pay directly. If they're operating in crypto, pay your sales tax in crypto without an exchange coming to the state. That's one thing that we've been looking at. We're trying to find ways that the state can be receiving cryptocurrency as a valued commodity. It's a challenge for the state, but again, Wyoming seems like the place that should be doing that first. So we're trying to work through those challenges at this point in time. Contemplating royalties, it is very difficult for us to lower state royalty rates or change those in any meaningful way, but doing something that allowed us to contemplate credits that result in a win-win. So if at the end of the calculation, Wyoming comes out ahead and the business comes out ahead, that's what we need to look for. And I'm sure there are ways to explore that possibility. So if, you know, that I think that's a deeper calculation that we need to look at. But for example, I have legislation that I've been working on for a couple of years for sales tax amortization, where we don't cut the sales tax, but we allow large projects to amortize it over a number of years, so that from a cash flow standpoint, it's easier for the company to do the project. From the state standpoint, we break even, but it incentivizes development to the extent that it provides that cash flow for the company. Those are the kinds of things I'd love to hear about. And I suspect that's probably something that would be valuable for larger mining operations, where that cash flow concept and a large purchase for the project might be something that amortizing over the lifetime of the project, or for 5 years or 10 years, whatever the case may be, might be valuable. So I appreciate that concept.
I appreciate it as well. Alex, Matt, and Jay, I know we've talked quite a bit, you know, in the past about this and what Wyoming can do. You know, there's not, I think it's considered a high mountain desert, so there is not a lot of hydropower. There's no Niagara Falls, right? But there is, you know, geothermal. I think it's a little bit early for that type of technology. Still trying to figure that out. There might be a really good fit with, you know, oil drilling holes and geothermal in the future, but that might not scale to more than a couple megawatts per site.
This is something that we can have Dr. Krutka talk a little bit about. We are trying to explore better production of geothermal power in Wyoming, and we've got some projects. So I'd ask Dr. Krutka to weigh in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there certainly is potential. We have a lot of interest in looking at existing wells that have already been used for oil and gas production. And so I think our team has begun to look on mostly the western side of the state so far, and we think that's probably where the opportunity is. I think it's too early to comment on whether or not that's going to be a viable approach for this type of energy production, but certainly one of the many things we're looking at.
Yeah, is there anything else going on, sorry, Dr. Krutka, with energy innovation that we should all be aware of?
Well, yes, Amanda, there is. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of what we're doing all day, every day. We're even looking at, just like was already touched on with natural gas and the lower cost if it's not if it doesn't need to be transported. We're also looking at some novel power generation technologies. One is called flameless pressurized oxycombustion, and that is ready probably to be demonstrated at I would say at least it's been demonstrated already at the 5 and 15 megawatt scale, so ready to be scaled up from there. That would you could use solid fuels, biofuels, waste, coal or natural gas in that combustor, or any combination thereof. And you can the interesting thing about that technology is it essentially produces a high pressure CO2 stream that's ready for carbon sequestration underground. And so that's the CO2 storage side we've been working on a long time, so we do know where to store it safely in the state. There are existing tax credits at the federal level to do that. So we think the combination of all these things could actually result in a net carbon negative power generation facility that is reliable and is really new and innovative. So that's just one of many things going on. We're also building up a hydrogen energy research center, and we think hydrogen could be a really useful approach to storing energy. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to use hydrogen for this conversation. I just point out that it could be used to store energy generated from wind, and we think we have the right geology to store it in such quantities that you could store it for perhaps weeks, and then really have very stable power generation when you combined wind with that probably lower cost energy storage compared to batteries or something else. So that's just a few examples. I already mentioned the nuclear plant that Rocky Mountain Power and TerraPower are working on. So lots going on, lots to be excited about.
On the flameless oxycombustion project, that would be a great opportunity. I think there are other opportunities where we want pilot scale. So think 150 to 300 megawatts of power development as a demonstration facility. If we had a partner that wanted to consume that energy and offset some of the cost, then it would be easier to get the finances together, whether that's a joint project with DOE, the state, and business, that effectively a public-private partnership to generate a test facility would be an exceptional way for us to create some win-win-wins.
Absolutely. I think it's a real issue as you start to scale things up. You need to test the technology, but where do you put it on the grid for a first of a kind demonstration? You still are going to need to transport that electricity to the grid, but who wants to be relying on it exclusively, and building it for their power generation? So there's a chicken and egg issue with technology development, and I think this could certainly help with that.
I would just say, please go ahead.
Sorry, one thing that I'd note, so there is a company called PRTI that's pioneering. They're using thermal deconstruction. So they're taking waste tires, which is a huge, there's billions of tires every year going into landfills. And so they're taking it, and it's not combustion, where in Ontario 20 years ago, we had people complaining, oh, we're not lab rats because you're burning municipal waste. What they're doing is they're taking the product, deconstructing it and using the thermal power. And what's interesting is that's something that's very scalable in terms of you can take that technology at the site. And from a business perspective, it's really interesting because municipal solid waste typically has tipping fees. So you get paid to take in the feedstock. And I used to work with steel and cement plants, and they would use alternative fuels, engineered fuels, take in the waste. So here you are actually paying miners to take something. So I think, if that's something your state is open to, I'm happy to connect you with that team. And that's, and you're right, it doesn't have to be just municipal solid waste. You can add in biomass feedstocks, dedicated switchgrass, whatever, or you can mix them to have a bit of that biomass component. And that's a technology that's scalable and exportable to various feedstocks and pretty cool. And I think that's the one thing that people aren't aware of. Mining, there's kind of like an explosion of different niches that miners are starting to move into. So yes, you have the large scale, marathon, gigawatt facilities, but you also have small scale ones that are kind of finding their place because they have a competitive advantage, whether that's PRTI or companies like Mint Green, which is in Canada, and they've partnered recently with the city of Vancouver to do a heat offtake agreement. So they're selling heat for district heating because they're using immersion. And these are the types of things that are happening that I think are pretty awesome and that we're integrating, right? There's another company, Compass, you guys are partnering with Oklo with small scale nuclear reactors. And that's kind of, that's new, maybe that's something you can dive into yourself, but that's sort of a different business model as well. And I've worked with renewable energy farms where whether that's a farm that's energy constrained, that the miner comes in, they're a customer of last resort, they're buying 24/7, 365. But the key part there is, that they can lower their cost because they're buying the power for a cheaper price, and they can be in a place like Texas or Wyoming. It's cheaper than the grid power, but then when the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, you can, buy off the grid. And if you're transition connected, you can lower some of the fees that you pay. But yeah, I think it's awesome to see that we integrate with a variety of sectors, and we can help sectors reduce their GHGs. Because, for example, in the case of where you're doing something like district heating, or you find a heat load like a greenhouse, especially during the winter months, you can take that heat, and if you were a greenhouse or just a facility that needs heat that's using something like coal or natural gas to provide that heat, you might be replacing it if, for example, you're taking grid, which has a lower carbon footprint. So anyways, just some things to think about.
Maybe just to add on to kind of Holly, your question there about kind of finding some of these customers that have flexibility and kind of pairing with some of these pilots. And I think there's probably a few of us on the call that would be kind of would be open to that. And I think Whit, his company as well, would be, but just kind of want to share about some of the models that we're starting to see emerging in mining, right? So like there's the traditional model of saying you're going to be grid connected and you're pulling from the grid all the time, and you're turning off during the high price hours. So that's kind of like model 1. Model 2 is you're actually co-located with a generation resource called like a wind farm, call it like in Wyoming in a very windy spot, and you're co-located with that wind asset, and then you're just firming from the grid, right? So that you're the capacity factors in Texas, I think, are about 40%. So I'm guessing it's higher in Wyoming. And so say it's 50, that means that half the time you're pulling from the grid and half the time you're pulling from the wind resource. So that's kind of model 2. And then model 3 is also kind of really kind of independent, is really crazy to think about, saying like it's actually the monetization of electricity production without wires, meaning that you can actually co-locate right next to it, and you can have these facilities that they can moderate their kind of output, their consumption based on exactly what the output is of that facility. So you think about just like a wind resource that's connected on a hill with no wires connecting the grid, and you can monetize it that way. Just to share about kind of, outside of Texas, we're also getting phone calls from other wind developers, and we're at various stages with these developers. And one example is a developer that's in MISO that recently is getting curtailed on 60% of their wind farm. And so they're looking for a better customer than the grid, right? Because somebody came in and located a wind farm right beside them, and now they're being curtailed because there's not enough wires to take that off. And so they're calling up and saying, hey, we need help, which is kind of being reactive and saying we needed help to bring some load to the site. But there's a really big opportunity to be proactive, right? Because in Texas, where we're locating at these sites, it's being reactive to this massive amount of wind that was built, this large queues in the system, and they're going to be curtailed. And so you need to bring this load there to be reactive. But being proactive means that you can actually partner with these wind assets and you build them out in parallel, right? So that you can have this potentially like a 500 megawatt wind site in parallel with this 500 megawatt campus. And just tying back to kind of the last point here is just on your goal for 5%. The current hash rate right now is about 155 exahash per second. So say we did a 5x between now and the next halving, that's 800 exahash per second. If the US was 35%, you're at 280 exahash. And then if Wyoming's trying to claim 5% of that, that's 14 exahash. So we'll call it 15 exahash per second to get that 5%. And so what that works out to be is 500 megawatts of new gen miners that are air cooled will produce 15 exahash a second, right? And so some of these large industrial projects that we're doing in West Texas have the same application in Wyoming, but you guys are at an advantage where you can actually be proactive in this planning versus being reactive, saying we got too much, we need to curtail it. How do we fix this? So just I'd share that and kind of your comments about how do you find these customers to kind of partner in these new technologies.
So
that's Matt, all you. Yeah.
Shaun, I love the way you put that, and I think I would echo that sentiment and kind of say that we envision ourselves as the customer of first resort. So rather than being the last one, I want to know at the front of the line both where the compelling energy sources are and what the cool technologies are. So when it comes time to engage, I want to know whether it's immersion, which is something that has kind of been alluded to. We cash flow nicely. We're highly motivated. Energy is a huge percentage of our underlying cost. I mean, almost the entirety, right? And so we're looking for these new technologies, and we're willing to take the risk because the EV, the expected value is so comparatively high for us, and we're also nimble as kind of techie startup firms. So I think you'll see this in immersion. To give one example of a field where, as it moves down the cost curve, we're constantly looking for ways to push our technology, push our compute power with the same amount of resources. And so there are a lot of positive externalities to working with the mining community for tech in various states, and Wyoming, is one of them. Frankly, geothermal is another example of something where it just needs to price out enough for us to flip. And we're inherently risk takers. We're, after all, Bitcoin miners, and we see the calculus, and there's something quite compelling to these opportunities.
Matt, on that point, teaming up with a research university to explore some of the ways to create energy synergies. I mean, at the university, we burn an awful lot of natural gas just to heat water. We send that water out through pipes to the university, and it's a tremendous cost to the university, but obviously it's something that we do. We have our own power facility effectively for doing that. And we know that if we actually teamed it up with mining and we effectively powered electrical units with the natural gas and then made sure that all of the heat was captured through the steam generation, I'm a chemical engineer. I'm pretty confident in thermodynamics, and I know that all that heat ends up going to heat, regardless of what path you take to get there. So there might be some interesting synergies along those lines. And then there might be ways to even develop it better with immersion or something along those lines at heat exchangers. This is a great area where I think Wyoming, through the School of Energy Resources and through our College of Engineering, could get involved in doing some research projects, honestly, to optimize these types of technological advancements and development that then could be deployed elsewhere. So that it's not just about the massive scale, but I think we'd love to be engaged at the R&D level also, and try and find ways to move the needle.
No,
That's amazing. I love the immersion talk, by the way. Sorry to interrupt. I just was meeting down in Austin with a company, Midas, that does immersion at pretty big scale, and in specifically in Bitcoin mining, but I work on data centers, and just really interesting to see the technology and frankly the business model of how many less miners you need to be more productive. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Just one thing that I'll chime in with before we jump too heavy into the immersion. When it comes to R&D and it comes to working on some of these research projects, one of the ways that I would love for Compass to get more involved in the state is to help shine a light on these. So we recently, did a story on the Navajo Indians mining Bitcoin in New Mexico, and that got a ton of traction globally. It was on BBC Today, and we'd love to start telling more of these stories for miners in Wyoming. Our team right now is in Wyoming meeting with the Jai Energy team to tell their story and shine a light on some of the off-grid mining that's occurring in Wyoming. And we want to do more of this. We have a very big media arm, and we focus a lot of our time and attention on, putting great people in front of the camera and telling these stories. So just one thing that I'd love to work with each of you on when it comes to your growing footprint with regards to mining in Wyoming. Let us know how we can get engaged to share your story with more people.
There is if I can jump in for a quick second, there is a story to be told. We are starting to work with a number of the nations on some power projects. I don't want to disclose them publicly right now because they haven't been made public, but anyone who wants to reach out to me about that, we are working a bit on Wind River. We're even working in Oklahoma with the Chickasaw, and so I do believe that that's a huge opportunity, and anyone who is interested in that, please reach out to the university.
Will do.
I am personally too. Yeah. I love that. Thanks so much, Whit, for covering these stories as well. I think it's really important, especially in DC. A lot of the pushback that we're getting is around proof of work. I think, if we get Bitcoin, we understand that proof of work is essential for the security of the network and for it to be ruled by rules, not rulers, and is really kind of an innovation into triple ledger accounting, which was double ledger accounting was created in the 1400s. So it's been a while since a real innovation in accounting. So that's huge. I really appreciate that, and would love to get really follow through with some of this partnership with the university. So happy to help in any way I can.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Alex, looked like you were chiming in, and then would love to just get a little bit more, one more roundup of maybe mining in Wyoming, what that looks like. And there's a question from state lands about how to set up leases with miners. So if anyone has an idea on that, and then Jay, feel free to hop in as well. I know you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I wanted to come in on the back of that discussion Ryan was having a little bit earlier about kind of diversification of power generation assets, and it kind of goes with the immersion conversation as well. But I think that Wyoming is really well positioned not to be setting up these massive generation facilities or doing these massive grid connected facilities like they're doing in West Texas, but really kind of creating the landscape to where it's easier to blend generation resources together. So, what Shaun was talking about the kind of grid connected renewables, so the kind of co-location method that is then firmed up by the grid. You could even do that with multiple generation assets as well, or generation methods. So if you're thinking kind of a wind co-located with a nat gas turbine that's also connected to the grid, you're not only allowing for the miner to hedge across a variety of different generation resources. So if the wind is not, if nat gas prices spike up, they can rely on the wind in the grid. If, if it's, if wind is not blowing for whatever reason, we're seeing a little bit of pattern shifting with wind. It just gives a lot of ability to hedge risk from a generation perspective. But it also gives the ability to get that blended power cost down. And I think, like, speaking at the 5 cent level, like that's kind of the upper bound for folks that are setting up self-mining operations, for that to be economically viable and for it to be able to build to be durable through a bear market. And I think, Senator Rothfuss, to your question about what can Wyoming be doing, we see a lot of disruption in the regulatory space in terms of permitting, in terms of taxation, in terms of just long lead times to get things approved on a variety of these different, like, permitting to get gensets placed up. And Shaun, I might be getting out over my skis here, but in Canada, like, we've experienced quite a bit of turbulence when it comes to getting permitting to get gensets placed out on oil fields or oil pads. There was a blow up in South Carolina that happened a couple months back that was to do much with permitting at the kind of last minute that really hurt a lot of the miners, and that really hurt South Carolina's reputation from a mining perspective. And I think that if you can allow for these things to be moved forward quickly with minimal red tape, and especially these diverse generation assets and methods, it'll make things a lot more attractive to miners. And that kind of gets back to the earlier point about mitigating regulatory risk. And if you can demonstrate that there is not that risk, and in fact you're regulating to enable, as you say, I think that makes the entire state very attractive, and it'll give you some really innovative mining methods like we're talking about.
I'd like to add on to that. So what I've seen successfully done by jurisdictions, typically it's the smaller, more nimble jurisdictions, is create an office, whether that's for mining or whatever kind of aspect of the crypto industry. So create an office where you have a team that pulls together different parts of government, whether it's those guys on the permits and environmental permits, whether it's whatever else is needed to bring together to get through the entire approvals process, so that you can easily have points of connection. And so the miner just knows they approach one person, or sorry, one group, and then it's an easy laid out process. And sometimes, I'm not as familiar with your jurisdiction, but sometimes there's ways to kind of create streamlined approvals or shorter approvals for projects that are typically it's the environmental regs that hold things down. So if we know that a mining setup is less disruptive than something like setting up a chemical plant, the approvals can be accelerated because you don't have to go through the same types of hurdles. So something like that will help. And then in terms of, for myself, what I would add to as what the state can do is there's a lot of different types of skills that are needed. So I know typically governments work with, especially if government tends to fund educational institutions, it takes a while to build a curriculum. So understanding sort of what the needs are, whether it's on the energy side and skilled trades, sort of some of the opportunities that you guys are doing there in teaching students directly is super helpful. But it's talking to miners, understanding what the next kind of generation of workers and skilled workers they're going to need. It's networking specialists, right? It's welders, and depending on, if it's oil and gas, there's still kind of, there's programs that you can start to build to put in place. Maybe it's short, kind of like accelerated night courses, but just starting to talk to the industry to understand the needs of the next few years, and putting that in place is going to be huge and give you an advantage, because skilled workers are something that we lack.
Well, and Mags, that's something that we've taken very seriously in the state of Wyoming, not just in this space, but elsewhere, where we're trying to ensure that the university and our colleges as a network are capable of being responsive and adaptive to industry needs. So we've really been reaching out, not just here, but to other industries and saying, what do you need in 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, whatever the case may be. We will get it tooled up, whether that's through the university or through our colleges as a system. It is something we've been prioritizing. So I appreciate that. And anybody who's listening that has specific needs like that we could get immediately integrated into our community college system and the university structure, that would be tremendous.
I could just follow up to Senator Rothfuss' comment. One of the things I am happy to be able to announce is that the University of Wyoming and the Blockchain Center at the university just received a significant grant through ARPA funds to engage in a 3-year educational program in cooperation with our Department of Education and our community colleges. And we are going to be putting together curriculum for high school, the community colleges, and continuing ed for business. And that's going to be shaping up in the next few months, because we were just awarded the grant last month. And so it'll be an ongoing project. And I think by the end of this 3 years, Wyoming is probably going to have the best educated population in digital assets.
I appreciate it. I think, so that kind of leaves us with closing remarks. I know a few folks have had hard stops, so try to wrap this up in the next couple minutes. But maybe, one thing each of us could do is depart with, a little wisdom or into Bitcoin mining and the cycles in that, or in what Wyoming needs to consider, and or ideas for Senator Rothfuss and the committee to consider, or the university to consider as well over the next month or so as we get into the new year. So maybe we'll go in alphabetical order of who's left. We've got Griffin.
Yeah, my pearl of wisdom is, if y'all are in Wyoming, you know how innovative cowboys make up the oil and gas field. Same guys that are drilling miles under the earth sideways and deep sea, pulling dragons out of the ground. Those guys are just now understanding Bitcoin mining, and they don't even scratch their heads. They're going to make us so more efficient that, bless the Chinese guys that really held onto the network, but there's just innovation is not bred in communism. And so you're about to see the entire game get shifted on its head, in my opinion. And so the faster you get experience, the faster you get into it. I don't think that there's going to be, huge opportunities in 6 to 10 years. It is learn in your garage, get in these classes, and try to just get involved and meet as many people as possible, because the hash rate difficulty is going to get ridiculous once Captain America comes in and really shows the world how it's done. Thanks for having me too.
Thanks, Griffin. Really appreciate it. Thanks for the pearls of wisdom. Jay, I know you have some insight as well into the cycles and some things to consider there.
Absolutely, and I think Griffin that makes a great point there, right? I think the innovation is going to be astronomical, and I do think the opportunity is now. Been in the space for a minute, and definitely, I'm excited to work in Bitcoin every day, but it just only gets more exciting. I do think that a lot of innovation is going to come to pass in the mining field specifically. I think the U.S. and states like Wyoming are great places to breed that. I will also say my pearl wisdom is built for the bear market. I've mined through a couple of them. It's terrible. That's why, all-in power cost is really, really important, and the permitting and all that stuff, all that the potential drags on it, do factor into that. And, with some of the states that we've worked in, I think there's a lot of, unfortunately, there will be a lot of failures for folks who have not built for that. Mining's very hot right now. So just, about staying focused and grounded in the reality, because this is a very hands-on business. It's not white collar. It's out in the oil field. It's out, at the generation site.
Yeah, thank you. I think the bear market is really important to consider as well, as we're really excited. Miners are really profitable. We've already pretty much caught up to the hash rate pre-Chexit, and the halvening when the miner fees get cut in half in May 2024. There's a lot don't make it through that. So that all-in power cost is why miners are kind of obsessed with that. They've it's a bloodbath sometimes. So we'll go ahead and hear from Mags, and then Nat and Ryan and Shaun.
Sorry, just parting words of wisdom for the students. Yeah, I think just to echo on, start learning, start reading. If you can get your hands on a miner, like physically, just to see how it works, connecting in, the best thing is to do it hands-on. and to read, take the time to be voracious about reading, because there is a place for you, if you're focusing on the energy sector, but if you have a specific expertise, there's a variety of places where you can look for jobs, whether that's actually utilities that have created units. For example, in British Columbia, BC Hydro, we're provincially, we have provincially led power infrastructure. They have a specific team that actually looks to attract, miners and talk to miners. So you don't have to necessarily find a job at a mining company, but if you show that you have that knowledge and it's a company that caters to the mining company, one of the best ways to learn is to take that initiative and read and play around.
And I'd like everyone to send us your obsolete ASICs that are no longer power efficient, and we'll get them to kids in classrooms, and they'll have a hands-on opportunity to burn energy and waste money.
Make money. Positive externalities.
Exactly. Yeah.
My only words of wisdom out of this is it's great. I mean, I'm so excited that we had so many attendees. I mean, you've picked a hell of a sector, so I really hope to see you in the space. It's growing. We want to have you here. We want to do cool things together. So yeah, we're happy to be a resource. I'm on LinkedIn. Happy to chat, especially with students about the what and the why and the how, about how to get you more involved and really turn Wyoming into the powerhouse that it should be in Bitcoin.
Thanks, Matt. Ryan, and then Shaun, and we'll let Senator Rothfuss and Dr. Krutka end.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of play off what Jay was saying a little bit, where the mining industry is really hot right now. It really reminds me of kind of the boom times in 2008 in oil and gas. And with that, some of the takeaways I learned was, everybody's trying to make a deal. You can be creative, but at the end of the day, it's all about operating with integrity, and basically start filtering your network off the people that you trust, build your reputation, and really surround yourself with those that you, I guess, are like-minded. Because I think that's one thing that I love about the Bitcoin space is it self-selects for some of the most interesting people in the world. And it's just a pleasure to be here. And thanks so much for putting this all together.
Thanks, Ryan. Good luck in Wyoming too. It's fun.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Yeah, thanks for putting this on. This has been amazing. Senator Rothfuss, thank you for joining. It's amazing to see kind of the commitment that Wyoming is showing to this space, and just being here and listening is amazing. Just to kind of answer the question you had, Amanda, about kind of what can Wyoming do at the economic development level. Actually, I think it's about kind of continuing on with this conversation and having kind of like a work group or whatnot with the team here. And it's really understanding that, so currently the Bitcoin mine network consumes 12 gigawatts of energy, ballpark. And, if Bitcoin mining is going to do what it's expected to do from people on this call, the future of Bitcoin mining 15, 20 years out is going to be 200 gigawatts, right? So a 20x in energy consumption, right? And so that's a lot to kind of think about, but we believe that this future is this, it allows this renewables build out, and the system allows you to overbuild renewables because you have this always a buyer of currently first and last resort, but as last resort. So I think kind of the value proposition of having a work group is really understanding kind of what are the options available to other miners and choosing locations, right? So that if they're choosing to go somewhere else, like why are they doing that, right? Because everybody on this call will admit, saying that Bitcoin miners were looking for the lowest all-in delivered energy cost, which is usually in areas rich with renewables and constrained with transmission, but really understanding kind of those billing components in different areas, and how can Wyoming impact kind of that structure to kind of what you mentioned about a deregulated part of a regulated area, but just what are the options so that Wyoming can really compete, because you guys have been blessed with this amazing wind resource that can be tapped into. And so just to be great for us all to be able to have conversations and kind of share our learning, so that you guys can use that to kind of shape your policy and kind of incent miners to come into space.
I love the idea of a working group. So if you'll have us, and consider it, Senator Rothfuss, maybe floated in your committees. I think this is an incredible group of individuals, and there are so many that aren't on that are also mining in Wyoming that have a lot of value to add as well.
And if any students need internships, holler at Limpia Creek Technologies. Always looking.
They always do.
So Amanda, do you want me to just say a few words? So yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone, the panelists, and then the participants for joining us today. We had quite a large group, and we were having folks register after it started. So we have recorded this, and we're going to send it out to everyone. And so please forward to folks you know, and push it out through our social media to make sure that people who weren't able to join are able to listen to the conversation. So Amanda, thanks so much for your leadership pulling this together. And if anyone's interested on the energy side, please visit our website and follow us at the School of Energy Resources on social media. And now I'll hand it off to Senator Rothfuss for his closing remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Krutka, and thank you, Amanda, and everyone for putting this together, everyone joining us today. This has been incredible for me, a great opportunity to understand more about the space. I want to address two things in closing. The first is the idea of a working group, which I think is essential. We've been working in digital assets for the past 5 years and have been successful, and it hasn't been because of the good ideas of the folks on the select committee. It's been because we were willing to listen and reach out to folks that know what they're talking about in this space and have specific vested interests. They have experiences, they have problems that they need solved. And what we did differently was we actually tried to solve those problems and listened to them rather than just trying to set policy. That's the regulating to enable. And this is another space where I appreciate this assembly of stakeholders and experts. And this is what we needed. We need to understand what we can do better. We need to understand what your challenges are and what you're confronting and how we can work with you to solve those challenges. So we will move forward then with the working group. I think there's no question about it. And I appreciate the involvement of those that have been here today with us. And then the next and final thing I'll note as we close is that we do have our next select committee meeting on December 9th and 10th. While we meet in person in Cheyenne this time, we do broadcast virtually, and we try and take testimony. We try and provide opportunities for public input, public testimony. So if you can't make it to Cheyenne on the 9th and 10th of Wyoming in next week, please join us virtually. It will be live streamed, and then we seek feedback from that. We will have at least one piece of legislation, but I think just one that looks at the deregulated power zones as a means of trying to bridge some of the concerns that we have. But hopefully that's not the end of what we can do to facilitate this space. So thanks again to everyone. This is the beginning, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Look forward to further town halls like this, and also look forward to some personal conversations one-on-one based on some of the things that you've provided. I'd like to follow up with quite a few of you. So again, thanks to everyone. Thanks to the university for facilitating, Amanda, and everyone. Take care.